Welcome back to Disturbed Reality. Today once again we delve into the world of brutal Mexican drug cartels, in particular the Los Zetas. Many of you guys have requested this specific topic, but before we get into it, I wanted to wish you guys a happy Christmas and a happy New Year. Hopefully you have a great time, you spend it with your loved ones, relax and enjoy the festive period. I'm also going to take this time to sponsor my own video. I now have merch, a link will be available in the pinned comment, so if that interests you, check it out and rest assured in the new year I will be adding more designs and more options for you guys, so check that out if you're interested. But nevertheless, let's get into the meat and potatoes. This video is something that a lot of you guys have requested for quite some time, and it involves arguably the most brutal drug cartel to ever come out of Mexico, the Los Zetas. Now, as I'm sure you guys are aware, the Los Zetas originally started as an armed wing of the Gulf Cartel, but as the years progressed, and as the Los Zetas gained influence and infamy, they then split from the Gulf Cartel. This occurred in early 2010. Essentially, they had more members, were generating more revenue, and they decided, we don't need the Gulf Cartel any longer. This resulted in bloodshed across Mexico. The rise of the Los Zetas essentially introduced the militaristic aspect of cartel warfare. Before their rapid downfall, the Zetas were dominating in the early 2010s. As a result, the other cartels had to keep up, and essentially in turn, they also became much more armed and much more militaristic, and that really set the scene to the cartel landscape that we see today. When you look at the landscape in 2021, it's obvious to see the Los Zetas' influence, the best example being CJNG. They are following similar tactics of the Los Zetas, join us or die, no compromise. They are heavily armed, with multiple members, and much like the Los Zetas, they like to release their propaganda videos, which includes some of the most heinous, brutal, and barbaric videos that you will ever set your eyes upon. So despite the Los Zetas now being a shadow of what they once were, the impact that they left is still being felt today. Most of the bloodshed involving the Zetas stemmed from the war between them and the Gulf Cartel. In the early 2010s during this war, it felt like a new torture video or murder video by the Zetas was being released weekly. Some of these videos can still be found online. The sad fact is, the violence between the Los Zetas and the Gulf Cartel wasn't just contained between them. Numerous civilians were caught up in this war, and countless people died, literally in the hundreds. And I'm talking innocent civilians, and this was mainly caused by the Los Zetas. They resorted to kidnapping and extortion to fund their war, and any non-compliance would usually result in a brutal death. They also tried to recruit regular civilians once they were taking casualties, and again, if there was no compliance, it was basically instant death. So this war was extremely brutal, arguably the most brutal narco war in Mexican history. And the sad thing is, it wasn't just contained between cartel members. Countless civilians also got caught up in this. The fact of the matter is, if this was a war, some of the atrocities committed would have been classed as war crimes, in particular by the Los Zetas. Brutality and bloodshed was the Zetas' language. Despite the Zetas' huge rise and early success in the 2010s, the cartel was plagued with infighting and paranoia, particularly after Miguel Trevino Morales became the new leader after succeeding Heriberto Lazcano. Originally, the change in leadership was amicable, but soon after, Heriberto realized that he made a mistake handing over the leadership. He underestimated Morales and gave him too much power. Morales won the loyalty and respect of many in the Los Zetas, and eventually, many stopped paying loyalty to Lazcano. Rumors of an internal struggle and infighting then persisted. Essentially, in terms of personality, Trevino Morales and Lazcano are opposing figures. Miguel Trevino Morales preferred violence and warfare, whereas Lazcano held more old-school criminal values. he was a lot steadier and able to keep a cool head, and ultimately, he wanted to keep the Los Zetas as a stable and strategic criminal organisation. Lascano reportedly wanted the Los Zetas to be less violent and less of a problem to the then next political administration of Enrique Pena Nieto, but in contrast, Trevino Morales was described as somebody who wanted to fight the fight. Essentially, I think Lascano realised he made a mistake in handing over power to Miguel Trevino Morales. Morales was a full-blown psychopath and arguably the most violent cartel leader to ever come out of Mexico. Reportedly, Miguel Trevino Morales couldn't sleep easy at night if he hadn't organised the execution of somebody on that day. Allegedly, he was involved in many executions and murders personally. When you look back, it does make you wonder, if Lascano never handed power to Morales, would there have been less violence? Would there have been less infighting? And would the Zetas still be a big factor today? I guess we'll never know. Ultimately, Heriberto Lascano handed power to the wrong man. He essentially destroyed what made the Los Zetas so successful in the first place. In the early years, including when they was with the Gulf Cartel, they were ran by ex-Mexican military personnel, and as a result, due to the military tactics and training, they were very successful in their wars and battles. But once Miguel Trevino Morales took over, that militaristic cohesiveness dissipated. The military-type tactics that made the Los Zetas so successful in the first place vanished, and this was due to the fact that Miguel Trevino Morales was not an ex-military man. He was just a street criminal who rose through the ranks, unlike the previous Los Zetas leaders and commanders. Miguel Trevino Morales had an insatiable ego, a hot head, and an appetite for violence, which ultimately led to the downfall of the Los Zetas. As I mentioned previously, the Los Zetas were very well known for releasing execution videos of rival cartel members. They essentially popularised it in the narco world. These execution videos are seen by these cartels as an effective way to strike fear into their enemies' hearts and also keep civilians in check. But not only that, they were also used to keep their own members in check. Several videos were released depicting the execution of so-called traitors and snitches. And that takes us to this video. In my opinion, this is arguably the most violent Los Zetas video. So, as always, a little disclaimer, don't go searching for this video. It's extremely graphic, extremely brutal, and just not worth watching, quite frankly. But nevertheless, what actually happens in this video, and why did it occur? Well, there is a little bit of backstory behind it, and we can ascertain some information from the dialogue in the video. First and foremost, this is a Los Zetas video, and the reason for this execution, according to many narco websites, was that the victim was essentially a traitor to the Los Zetas. He was accused of treason, essentially. I'm assuming that means that he gave up information to either another cartel or even law enforcement. Listening to the dialogue in the video, we also ascertain what the victim's nickname is, and he is referred to as Morena. Now, I believe Morena in Spanish means brunette, so I'm assuming this is just a regular nickname to refer to people with brown hair. Maybe you guys can enlighten me in the comments, but nevertheless, the video opens up and it's shot in what appears to be a wooded rural area. The victim has his hands tied behind his back and he's sitting in the floor in just his pants, and he is surrounded by 3 to 4 cartel members. There is no introduction speech like in many cartel videos. They get down to the nitty-gritty straight away. The violence commences immediately, and they start by cutting off his feet with a machete. They start with the right foot, and it basically takes them 2 or 3 hard hacks, and his right foot is pretty much completely dismembered. It's hanging on by a thread of skin, a thread of flesh. They try to pull it, it doesn't come off, so they just slice through the remaining piece of flesh, and his right foot has been dismembered. They then continue the process with his left foot, and once again 3 to 4 hard hacks, and his left foot has been removed. And all throughout this, when they were removing his feet, He made, and I'm not exaggerating, no reaction at all. No screaming, no crying. There was barely even a grimace on his face, and you could literally hear the machete snap bone and whatnot. You know, they were really going at his ankles, and they removed them super quickly. After he had his feet removed, at this point he does plead with his captors, and he says, "Please kill me." The cartel executioner responds, "No, you're on your way, don't worry, but we're going to do it in my style, in pieces." After the victim had his feet removed, the Los Zetas then moved to slicing off his arms at the shoulder. They place the victim on his side, they lift up his right arm, and the cartel executioner starts slicing under his armpit. Pretty much immediately there's gallons of blood on the victim's torso, and unlike the ankle segment of this video, the victim is screaming in pain. Screams that you're not going to forget in a hurry. As they're slicing off his arm and he's screaming in pain, they make him say, "Arriba Los Zetas," which means "up the Los Zetas." The cartel executioner soon realizes that he can't remove the victim's arm by just slicing under the armpit. He then switches and slices from the top of his shoulder, and eventually, instead of slicing, he begins hacking away at the top of the victim's right shoulder. And honestly, the sound of blade on bone is horrible. I can't really put it into words, but it's amongst the worst I've heard. Eventually they remove his right arm. At this point, the victim is still alive, but it appears that he's drifting in and out of consciousness. At this point you can see that the victim's body is fighting to stay alive. At this point, naturally they start to remove his left arm, you know, hacking and slicing away, and they actually crack jokes during this segment. One of the guys, and I think it's the executioner, he says, "Just kidding, Morena, it's just a big joke," and they all start laughing and tell him to stop snoring. And yeah, you see them starting to dismember his left arm, and that is where the video ends. So yeah, definitely a bad one, and definitely one of the worst Los Zetas videos that I've seen personally. One more interesting rumour surrounding this video. So naturally, when they kidnapped this victim, they obviously confiscated his phone, and apparently what they did, they actually recorded this on the victim's phone, and they actually sent this video to reply to a text that the victim got during his kidnap. I hope that's not true. I mean, if that is true, that could have been anybody. His kids, his mother, his father, his brother, his best friend, his wife. Could you imagine that? I'm not sure that is true. I hope it's not true, but I have read that in a couple of different places regarding this video. So yeah, I mean, that's just another even more creepy element to this video. I mean, it's definitely possible. It is the Los Zetas after all. But yeah, a really gruesome video, really sadistic, and from watching the video, you can kind of tell that this one was personal. So yeah, a horrible video, and I wouldn't recommend that you guys search it out. I wish I knew more about the victim and what he allegedly did. That would be interesting. If any of you guys know the video I'm referring to and have any more information, please feel free to share below. I mean, it's easy to say that this guy was an idiot, he should have never double-crossed the Los Zetas, but let's say he was propositioned by another cartel and they were threatening his life. What choice does he really have, man? I mean, more than likely he can't just up sticks and get out of Dodge. You know, more than likely he doesn't have the money for that, so I guess he made the decision which he felt was best suited to keep him alive, but obviously that wasn't the case. That is the reality of the narco world, unfortunately. But yeah, interesting case. I know a lot of you guys have requested this one, so I thought I would get this one out of the way. Definitely a gnarly video. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, if you can enjoy this sort of content. Obviously, I wish you guys a happy Christmas and a happy New Year. Hopefully you have a great time. Thank you guys for all of the support that you've shown me in 2021. Again, we began uploading in May of this year, 7 months, and we've got this far, and it's all down to you guys. So appreciated. I can't thank you guys enough. Thank you very much for all of the support. And as always, stay safe, and I'll catch you on the next one.